Hello, I have a guest with me, and I'm going to do like a very just brief introduction of how we connected. So this person reached out to me on Instagram. They want to remain anonymous. So I'm going to respect that. And they're going to talk a bit about their experience with a high control group. So high control groups, they share a lot of common characteristics. And high control groups share a lot of the same things that MLMs do. And so I'm going to now turn this over to this person that contacted me on Instagram. I'm going to be respecting their privacy, their anonymity, and please introduce yourself and why did you contact me? What would you like to share?
Hello everyone, I am Tony, and the reason I ended up contacting Julie was I was going through an anti-MLM video binge, and I found your YouTube channel. My very first video I watched was like the video about leaving Amway after 36 years, and something about that story really resonated to me. And also as a disclaimer, what I am telling you today is a personal opinion only for entertainment purposes. If you happen to know who I am talking about, please not harass or go after any of the social media presence. My story is not a petting zoo, and this is a story from one of the groups that I ended up falling into. Another thing is that my story is from personal opinions and opinions only. I'm not sharing any facts.
Understood?
Alright, thank you for understanding. And also, another thing I must be very transparent about is that I have a speech disability. So if you need me to repeat myself, again, please let me know. No, and I also realized that my voice can sound a little awkward, like the octaves don't really line up very easily. So if there's any strange fluctuations, please be aware. Please be aware that I have a speech disability, and I do have autism. My autism, because of the lack of socialization when I was younger, makes it harder for me to verbalize what I'm thinking, and therefore I sometimes repeat myself a few times when I'm storytelling, which I'm trying to practice, which I'm working on in therapy.
Great. Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let me go into how I was recruited into the organization. So I was in a very down, dark part of my life. It's very similar to a lot of the MLM stories I hear. Is that people join the MLM either when they had a life and a divorce strategy, when they were financially down, or when they were emotionally or mentally not doing very well. And cheers to coffee. Coffee is the best. Heck yes.
You got that right.
Many people in the MLM stories, many people I know in the MLM stories that I listened to, found themselves like looking for any sliver of hope. They were looking for anybody to come as a Prince Charming or rescue them, to save themselves from the financial disparity, from a foreclosure, or from an unexpected pregnancy. For me, I was in a really dark point in my life. Like nothing was looking up. I was disabled, having a hard time, struggling to find any income sources, and I also have a really hard time working retail, just because of the overstimulation from the bright lights and the organization skills that are required from communicating with people constantly, especially during the holidays. That's why I prefer calmer and quieter environments whenever I'm working, or even working in kitchens, just because there's less people to interact with, and I can repetitively chop vegetables all day long. Well, in this point of my life, I literally had nobody, nothing. That's what it felt like. I was in the middle of dealing with some really severe mental issues, and lo and behold, a recruiter approaches me. And also, by the way, I was trying to lose some weight. I will not go into the weight loss experience itself or very many of the religious aspects just because that is not what I'm here to talk about. But the recruiter came and said, hey, look, I know you're going through it. So do you want to do, so I'm offering you this position in this organization. And I will offer you this position in this organization. And look, and you will definitely be able to, and you'll definitely be able to live a fulfilling life. You'll get housing, you get enough food. We'll make sure to feed you because I know that you have a lot of food insecurities. We'll make sure that we'll just make sure that we'll just make sure and we'll just make sure that your career blossoms too. That is what I was told. After I was told what it would be like to be in an organization, I then found out that they had like a social group. So the social group people began reaching out and saying, hey, it's so nice to meet you, Tony. We would love to have you on. We just love that you're here, and we are really excited to finally meet you. I know we've heard about you for quite some time, and we just really want to help you out. One of them also revealed one of them also revealed that I was like one of them also revealed that they actually saw a spark in me unlike anybody else that they've seen, which is actually a very common line used within multi-level marketing. That line is often used to like tell future recruits, especially in pyramid schemes or like high control group coach, saying you're one of the kind, you're special, and you found a place of belonging. We are family. That is the words I exactly heard. That is the words I craved, because during that time, I was not really trusting my family. I was not trusting my friends I had at the moment, just because I found myself really worried about anybody who had anything to do with my family. That way I was mentally in life. Let me know if you have any questions while I'm talking.
No, this is great. I'm just riveted to your story. You're a good storyteller. Please continue.
Thank you. I try. Honestly, storytelling is one of my weaknesses. Verbal storytelling is one of my weaknesses, but if I do write a story, I can definitely really polish it up. However, I find for me as an autistic individual that I prefer hearing verbal storytelling just because I process things way easier in my sleep. So I do apologize to anybody listening to this while you're trying to sleep because my voice wakes you up.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I know a lot of you. I know quite a few of your view. I know quite a few people who are watching just are trying to get a good night's sleep right now. But welcome to the rock concert. You shall now wake up. All right. So going back to the coffee field wakey story. I will also dive a little bit deeper into the love bombing, which I have seen in so many multi-level marketing videos and stories. By chance, do you know Hannah Alonso and her MLM horror story series?
Absolutely. I'm friends with Hannah. We've got
No,
history. Yeah,
no way.
she's an incredible content creator. She's shouted out my channel a number of times, featured some of my content in hers, and I have so much respect for her. She's an excellent human being and a really good content creator.
Same here. I can 100% back Hannah. She's one of my favorite content creators too. She's one of my favorite content creators in my sleep. That's who I watch to fall asleep to at night some nights. So there's a story, an MLM whole story by Hannah Alonso. I forgot which one because I have probably binged the entire playlist within a year. There was this one story. There was this one story where a hun was like, not a hun, but a recruit was talking about how they were showered with affection. How they said like, we are family. We like literally saying how we are family, how we love you, and like the people in like the scheme. I forgot exactly what pyramid scheme it was, and how people in that pyramid scheme literally said, "Look, I am so glad that you joined us. I'm so glad that we can have you back every step of the way." And it was followed by 100 text messages a day from the group chat saying like, "You are the best. Welcome to the party. Red heart emoji, red heart emoji, red heart emoji." Not correction, not welcome to the party, but welcome to the group. Literally, that person felt like they were surrounded by brothers and sisters. For me personally, I felt that way. I joined one of the group chats, and literally everybody was sending me like memes, emojis, and saying, "Hey, oh my gosh, hey Tony, welcome, welcome, welcome." I felt love, but little did I realize that love I felt was conditional love. I was like, "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh." Finally, validation. Finally, somebody to validate my pain and my struggles. But here's the kicker. During the love bombing phase, I was told, "Hey, we hear you." Even one of the leaders from leadership said, "I can relate to your struggles that you're having with family," and they literally mirrored my struggles at the 1-to-1 ratio. For me, if I was to say, "Ugh, my family's really frustrating me with such and such," that person would be like, "Yeah, I hear you. I've been through the exact same thing." And as an autistic individual, the way I communicate and relate to people is saying, "Hey, look, I hear your struggle. However, this is how I also feel." I do realize that storytelling and that communication style does not always sit well with everybody, because most people are looking for somebody to be like sympathetic, either sympathetic or like, "Hey, I'm so sorry to hear. You can go ahead and vent," or "Hey, I'm here for you." But for me, when it comes to my communication style and patterns, which I'm also working on in therapy too, is I'm like, if somebody trauma dumps, then I trauma dump right back and say, "Hey, look, this is what I've been going through too," which I realize is very off-putting. And that's how I subconsciously scared off a lot of past people in my life, is intense trauma dumping, which is something I did not realize I was doing until my therapist and I sat down. However, the people in this organization slash movement were literally saying, "We will sit with you, we will relate," and they began mirroring my communication style, which I'm like, "Oh my gosh, finally somebody I can relate to. Finally people who get how I communicate and how I talk." And also for context, being autistic in today's society is already a very isolating and lonely experience. And because of my speech impediment, as compound interest, I am 12 years behind socially. I'm technically 12 years behind socially, because for the first 12 years of my life, I could barely speak a sentence. So I'm 12 years behind socially, and to top it off, I had very few people to communicate with, just because of how intense my autism special interests are. Followed by the fact, that I was already struggling to get employed, and I also genuinely struggle to get employed like as a retail worker, or to keep employment, just because there's like the subconscious message, aka the ugly laws, which started in Salmon, Massachusetts during the witch trials, that basically say, "Well, sorry, Tony. If you don't talk a certain way, if you don't look a certain way, and if you can't make eye contact, well, you're definitely less down. You're definitely less intelligent, and therefore, we don't really trust you. We don't really trust that you will be reliable during hiring process, and therefore, you aren't getting a job. Heck, if they even dare, heck, if I even dare to bring up my list of accommodations that me and my therapist work on, you know what happens? Whoop, next applicant. Many employers are like, well, we can just take the easy route and say, correction, he just didn't work out. He, she, they just didn't work out. Well, we're sorry, but I know we're supposed to be hiring some disabled individuals, but unfortunately, none of them worked out. They just go over my head and go to the next applicant. Some people, some employers even string me along to do the entire interview, only to say, well, I'm so sorry, Tony. I'm so sorry, Tony. We just don't really trust we just don't really trust that you are able to that you're able to work safely in our environment just because of the way that you communicate and your speech. We can't really trust that you'll be able to articulate yourself in an emergency, so that therefore you're out. These reasons alone, and I know that there's many more reasons which I may bring up as I'm telling my story, is that this is like some of the reasons why autistic and other neurodivergent folks like myself tend to fall prey to these schemes, to high control groups, and to in quotation marks movements, social movements. Well, getting into the group and integrating myself among my peers, also, or who I thought were my peers, either one of the managers or one of the leaders says that, oh my gosh, let me back up the bus. Yep, the train left the station. So, while getting settled into the group, settled into the organization, one of the leadership said, "Hey, I know that you've been expressing a lot of concern about people messing with you in your life, and you've been expressing a lot. I've seen on your social media posts that there's been a lot of people really like messing with you mentally and saying some really horrendous things about you faking your disability, and people accusing you of disability fraud, which little did I realize would come back to haunt me when I tried leaving." One commenter suggested that I disappear into the void with a bag of ramen, because within my social circle, a bag of ramen symbolizes poverty and homelessness. As a side note, I do love myself a bag of ramen, especially of them hard-boiled eggs and them leeks. Heck yeah, the ramen! Let's eat that ramen! And also in the comments, if you love some ramen, tell me what your favorite ingredients are in the ramen. What do you like to put in your ramen? I would love to hear and read all your ramen-induced comments for ideas. Alright, going back to the story of the ramen choo-choo train, I got to comment about the ramen, the void, and all the junk mail. One of the leaders said, "Hey," one of the leaders said that anybody who makes my life, that one of the leaders actually said to my face that they would make anyone's life who went after me a living nightmare. That is when I began developing a very unsettling feeling in my gut. Something about hearing what leadership would do to others who went after me did not sit well with me, because number one, I know that whenever somebody talks about what they would do to others, they will likely do to you if you get into a disagreement or argument. And number two, 1 second, bus is coming by. And number two, if if somebody actually says this is what we're going to do, and this is what we did to other people, very most likely I give it a 99.7% chance that they will do exactly what they talk about doing to others to you directly, if you cross them or if you say something that I did not agree with. Around that point, I began questioning the compensation plan, and when I spoke to management told me Just be thankful for what you have. That was a one liner that I heard is very common among multi-level marketing groups where the pyramid scheme or the upline says, hey, you just need to be more thankful. You should be lucky that you're here with a family. And why are you asking questions? That is how things work, followed by a bunch of thought termination. Management continued with, you should be lucky to be here. Not everyone wants much to do with disabled people, especially if they're overweight, like you. And leadership basically gave me the strong message that I just need to suck it up and be quiet, especially because of my disability, which I can relate to one of your interview subjects. Correct me if I'm wrong. I remember you doing an interview with somebody, I forgot her name, who had an autistic son, and she joined a multi-level marketing scheme, thinking that she would get a financial leg up and build a business for her son.
Yeah, actually, there was a guy in Rank Makers with me, that MLM adjacent coaching called Gary Martinez, and he spoke out. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I remember hearing the story of the backlash when the person was like, hey, why are you taking my downline, and why are you trying to get my down why are you trying to cut me, especially when she asked, what did I do wrong? Why is there such a huge push to take my downline from me and switch to another company?
Right. And you know what? I have to correct myself. I was referring to a previous interview from like a couple of years ago, but you're actually referring to another interview. It was much more recent, with somebody who had left Modere. So yeah, thank you. I just wanted to correct that because I made a mistake.
It's okay, and I can definitely draw parallels between both stories when it comes like the love bombing, the sisterhood, the brotherhood, the friendshiphood, the familyhood. And also another thing is becoming very clear across the recruitment tactics, is that literally you can't ask any questions, and when you ask a question, you either get the same response 5 times, and the same response comes from not one but multiple people, which is a really big red flag that you are in a high control group. And there's also a whole lot of, and during the recruitment phase, there's a lot of thought termination. Like for instance, in my there was like a lot of thought termination in my instance. Whenever I said, hey look, why are we doing this, thing this way, if we can streamline it and make it more efficient and do it the other way? Basically what I was told is that that is how leadership wants it done. And even when leadership asked for outside opinions or questions about how the operation ran, leadership like twisted the words and said, no, no, this is how we're going to keep running our operation. The outside opinions do not know what they're talking about. They're just a bunch of like naysayers. They're just a bunch of people who we just need to filter out and only focus on ourselves. I'm like, wow. Another thing that really caught my attention. Another thing that caught my attention was the discouragement to make outside friends. Whenever we went on organization outings and like in quotation mark community events, the leadership and along with like the other people within the group were like, we're not here to meet people. We're just here to enjoy ourselves and have a good time. So that is something that struck me as really odd. Like tying back to like the recruitment tactics, and how how it relates to multi-level marketing, because in multi-level marketing schemes, they do not want outside opinions, and if you were to get an outside opinion, they wanted the outside opinion to like favor the organization, so that they could be like, hey look everybody, even this outside person who knows nothing about us agreed with us. So that was when I began questioning, what the heck am I in? What the heck am I doing? Especially when the compensation plan, especially when I started seeing holes in the compensation plan and like in quotation marks the rank system. It was not an official rank system, but it was pretty similar. So here comes my breaking point. My breaking point came when leadership yelled at me for not committing enough. I was getting ready for bed, writing down for the night, and I believe that either leadership themselves or a group member called me asking them to do a favor, and I was like no, and I just flat out ignored my phone. I was not in the by that point. I was not in the mood. I was not in the mood to deal with doing any extra work outside of my compensation plan, especially at late hours when I was trying to go to sleep and rest for the day. So I ended up getting yelled at on the phone for not picking up in a timely manner and for not responding because of commitment issues. That is when I decided to leave the following morning. And up until this point, the love bombing was definitely fading away, and as when the organization started to show its true colors. I realized that most people would be telling me, Tony, can you just left? Can you just see the red flags? Tony, why do you not leave sooner? Well, let me be very honest. Number one, I was in a very mentally bad spot when I was recruited. Number two, I was feeling extremely insecure about my own body image. So that's why I wanted to listen to. That's why I was like so fed and so laser focused and so fixated into listening to whoever told me what I wanted to hear in my ears. I literally had no filter for. I literally had no discretion for love bombing, red flags, or cult recruitment tactics. That is how lasered and zeroed in I was, especially during the most vulnerable and fragile time of my life. I was in a very fragile mental state. So literally having having dozens of people, like not dozens, but lots and lots and lots of people telling me just how special I was, listening to my story, and just like saying that they'd take care of me, made me feel like I was on cloud nine. It felt like bliss. It felt like paradise on earth. Not using any religious terms, but it felt like paradise on earth. And I also found myself, and even when people texted me and expressed their concern about the previous experience with like the leadership or the group in the whole, like multi-level marketing, I was too deep into the love bombing, and I was already primed to ignore any of like the so-called in quotation mark haters. Literally, whenever I showed the group who was texting me, who's trying to get me persuading me to leave, the group already had stories and a narrative and stories concocted about these specific individuals. So I was like immediately like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, I can't believe any of them, which immediately discredited their stories. Literally in ways that the group would start doing the exact same tactics to me when I left. Some of the people who texted me were accused of being liars, thieves, trouble, drama starters, and people who cannot and people who just cannot see and people who are struggling to see the vision, and therefore they were just a jealous group of people looking to cause trouble, and a jealous group of people looking to destroy the group's mission. That is what I was being primed to as I was like showing people the text. So that is why I was not very quick to leave at first. And that's why I didn't leave before I was like so deep in by that point of investment, the group by that point of investment, I was so deep by that point of investment, I was so deep into the group that I literally cut out anybody else who would not align with the group. And I was still feeling really upset with my family for some pretty obvious reasons, which I'll not be going into. Basically, the only in quotation marks support system I had was the group itself. I had nobody else to reach out to. I felt like at the time I had nobody else to reach out to, and I had a really hard time. And you know what's really sickening is the people who I reached out to, who had left the group. When I reached out to them, what had happened? I nearly forgot to mention this part. I nearly forgot to mention this. Like multi-level marketing groups and schemes, there's a lot of group manipulation. I would just use this for an example. I forgot where I heard the story, but I forgot exactly where I heard the story. I'm going to be using the story as an example because I can't give away too many personal details in my story. So, for example, something very similar happened to me. There was this upline. Like one of the major companies. I can't remember which one. And that upline was like, and that upline to the recruit, to another recruit was like, hey, you know such and such over there? I've been feeling really frustrated about them. Do you want to talk about it? I know, and I've also know that you've expressed some frustration about such and such in the group chat. Next thing you know, the recruit and the upline, they're venting up a storm. But little does the recruit realize that the upline is already becoming buddies with the person who the downline is venting about. But also to complicate the dynamic, the downline is also still trying to be friendly to that other person who they're both venting about. So literally, they're venting up a storm. Literally, they're venting both the upline, the downline are venting up a storm. And as an autistic person like myself, I find that I need to vent a lot, and I need to process. That's how I process, is repeating my story and venting. Just because I have a hard time bottling up the trauma and holding it and having trauma slowly release itself slowly releasing itself. For me, I have to verbalize it and tell it like 1,000 or so times. Like it's like spinning cogs in my head. So similar thing happened to that downline. I believe that this was from like a Hannah Alonso video or another interview. I've like watched so much anti-MLM content that I forgot where I can't specifically pinpoint where or which channel I saw this on. Hold this on. So going back. So long story short, the downline leaves. The downline leaves the scheme. Yeah, the downline leaves the multi-level marketing scheme. And he immediately goes to the other person who they were venting about, who also happened to leave too. So the both of them, they think they can be buddies, talking about the experiences about leaving. But then you know who swoops in? The upline. The upline swoops into the other person who left DMs and says, "Hey, I know you don't want to hear this, but do you really want to know what such and such thinks about you?" And then she or they send the screenshots of the venting conversations, and immediately the friendship's over. Because the person's like, "Oh my gosh, you've been talking to the upline about me. I don't know who to trust." And by that point, the downline who received the screenshots is like so mentally frazzled and so shattered that they neglect to check the timestamps or the dates of the messages. They've either been like photoshopped or blurred out. Not blurred out, but cropped out. I had something very that's a great example of what happens when you're trying to leave. That is one example of what happens when you're trying to leave and get in a group manipulation. So that has happened to me with me and quite a few people. Where either leadership or one of the group members themselves lured me into talking about somebody who I could trust and rely on. Literally just started luring me and planting the seeds, saying like, "Hey, have you heard about this rumor? Hey, I don't think that's a safe person for you. Hey, I think that person is anti-disability. And it begins planting little seeds of doubts until the seeds blossom into a full and venting conversation where I find myself inadvertently bringing up past grievances and frustrations that I legitimately had with the other person, saying, hey, I know we're good friends, but this is some of my frustrations that I have. I know you're sharing your frustrations, but here are some of my frustrations. And literally the conversations are manipulated and edited in such a way that that person, by the time I reach out for help, has blocked me. That is some key and prime examples of how a story is parallel, like how that to parallel to multi-level marketing stories, to some multi-level marketing experiences.
I want to just add in or just like observe. I'm so grateful that you're talking about this, what happens in these high control groups. It's like our peers, the people in it, are enforcing this, because a lot of the discussions sometimes are coming from, well, this is the company, like in regards to multi-level marketing, the multi-level marketing company, the non-charismatic or the charismatic leader. But a lot of this like self-regulation goes on just from people within it who may or may not know what the hell they're doing. And I really like that you've pointed out these, these examples, because it's a topic that I think that we need to highlight and discuss more, is how we're all, like, when we're in this, we're used to uphold this whole framework, with or without our consent. And it's really terrifying just how you talked about the story that you heard and then how it happened to you. And I remember I've seen this like happen with another multi-level marketing company, Ariel. And it's like this predictable behavior that people are succumbing to, and some of them aren't even knowing what they're doing. Like, I know I had this experience with Monet. I haven't even thought about this until you brought this up. But it's like a strategy. You just like fall into line. This is what you do. Oh, have you heard about this person? Yeah, I start complaining about this. Yeah, it's like I want my, my friend or my upline's approval, and I can see that they have a point, so I'm going to like complain as well. And then that's used against you to even cut you off when you leave from the people who have left. It's so messed up. Anyway, thank you so much for bringing that up. Sorry to interrupt.
You're very welcome. Interrupt as much as you mean to, as much as you want to, because I really also enjoy hearing your perspective and hearing your points. Yes, it is what I find really wild. I know I'm going to interject some, but I know what I find really wild is just how much internal policing there is. Like not even from like the organization or the head of the organization itself, but within the group itself. And another thing is, it is real. And also another thing that kept me from leaving was the intense mind programming. I was programmed. I was programmed into thinking that any other niece adjacent group or niece adjacent like individual, they will that they were doing it for bad intentions, and therefore will not peer or whole. So like if I was to talk about another niece adjacent group, I was like then told that group lacks purity, or that group like completely lacks, or that group lacks any merit just because of like such and such, because of such and such and such. That's how the enemies were formed. That's how the outside enemies were formed, which was done very careful and very deliberately, because in multi-level marketing groups, it'd be one thing to be like, hey, don't join that other don't join that other like not pyramid scheme, but don't join that other multi-level marketing company just because of such and such and such, and if they were to bombard you on that messaging and like why these people were bad at the beginning, you know what? People will be running like Forrest Gump, like being run Forrest run whoop and be out of them like Sonic. But honestly, the programming is but honestly, in my opinion, and from what I find, the programming is very, very deliberate. Like literally, it's like instead of like a giant monsoon at once, it starts with a mist. It's like a little mist, and then the mist turns into raindrops, not drizzles, then raindrops, then it turns into then slowly escalates into a monsoon. And by the time that you realize that you're in a monsoon, you are literally thinking that you're in a bunch of mist. That is how I honestly felt inside. And that's my opinion of what happened. So, do you think that would be a good time to transition into speaking about what happened when I left? Alright, so the following morning after I got the non-compliant phone call, I said, no, what? I'm leaving. I've had enough. I've seen enough, and I've done enough. That morning, I declared saying, hey, I'm leaving, and I'm leaving. So fortunately, the very fortunate thing at that point is that I was in a better headspace. I was in a better headspace about my family, and my family said to come back, which was a huge lifesaver, because honestly, if I was not in a good space with my family, I likely would have stayed with the group for at least another few years. But fortunately, that one of the saving graces I had was a family who said, "Come on back. I know you've been through something really difficult. Please come back." So, as an autistic person, I do believe I mentioned this multiple times. I tend to trauma dump through repeating my story to multiple people, which is something I'm working on. Containing with my therapist to make me a more approachable person in the business world going forward. So at the time, I had very little coping skills besides screaming, rocking, having a meltdown, or talking. That is when I began speaking to who I thought were my close friends about why I left. Another thing that I got to point out is that who you think were your close friends in like the high control group will likely not be your close friends once you leave, because number one, the brainwashing, number two, the othering and people being and the group starts immediately would likely to immediately and number two, the group's tendency to immediately spread lies about you, about why you left, and about why you left. One of the alleged lies I found out about is that I not leave voluntarily. I was kicked out for lack of commitment. That was one of the biggest, in my opinion, and allegedly, that is one of the biggest lies that was spread about me personally. Is that I lack commitment all the time, and therefore I cannot be counted on. So I began. So I was like talking about what was happening, processing. Most times my messages went unread, or I was completely ignored, or I just thought I'm sorry, which I found really helpful. Just because literally 24 hours ago we were having full-fledged conversations. We were talking about our hopes, dreams, aspirations, and what it was like, and just like talking about life. Me and some other people in the group, we became like really close, as if we were family. But then all of a sudden, to have like messages gone red, that just fed into my desperation to keep talking. It was like a very vicious professional cycle, especially as an autistic individual with very little coping mechanisms at the time. I just need to amplify my voice. My logic was, if I'm louder, people will listen, which led me, which led me into receiving some legal threats. And as I got the legal threats, no one responded to my text. It was a very slow, painful burn. Literally, I went from having like a bunch of people who seemed to have my back, who seemed to love me unconditionally, suddenly shut down all communication with me, which is fed into wanting to amplify my voice even louder. So I made a really big mistake. So later on, I come to find out that some members spread what I confided into which I confided into to my then friends. Like what I was explaining earlier. I was saying I was venting to some people about what I felt like in the group, and how I felt about other group members. Literally, right as I left, people started sharing each other's screenshots and says, "Hey, look, do you want to hear the gossip? Look, here's some juicy gossip." That is what I began realizing because of the lack of response. So I do recall going public. I do recall posting about what happened to me on social media. I mostly I didn't really I didn't say the company, not the companies, but the organization's name. I didn't say anything that gave any identifying details except for here's my frustrations, here's what happens, and here's what happened, and like here's why I left. Because I was thinking like, eh, because I was thinking logically. I don't feel like having to explain why I left to multiple people. Might as well just have one thing on social media and say, hey, here's why I left, here's why I'm done. Just so I can be like, hey, so I can just refer people to the social media page of why I left, instead of having to repeat to myself multiple times, like the same story over and over again. So fast forward a few more weeks later, and I was texting a friend about what happened, my frustrations and my grievances. Just and out of nowhere, in the middle of our conversations, they send me a text that says, I know exactly what you did. And I'm like, what? I know the real truth. It is mental. I'm like, and I'm like, and I was like, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? Did I say anything? And another thing about being autistic is I have very sensitive rejection sensitivity dysphoria. So literally any slight of reject or any act of reject tends to send me over the emotional edge. Like literally I spiral. I can like once yeah, like once I found myself spiraling for weeks when someone did not respond to a text. Turns out the phone had completely died, and they were waiting for a replacement. Just not hearing from one person who was a really good friend sent me spiraling, saying, "Oh my gosh, what did I say? What did I do? What was I thinking?" And another one of my really big PDS triggers is having my messages left unread. Like I can see people leaving my messages unread for like a few hours, which I get because sometimes I see a message, I read a message, and I completely forget to respond. But to have a message gone left unread for days and weeks sends me into a really big PTSD spiral. Except, especially if the message is from somebody who I consider a friend or a really good acquaintance. It's one thing to get a message left unread from a professional acquaintance. Like I know, yeah, they probably have meetings. They're probably busy. They're probably this and that. So just let them take their time to respond. Just leave it alone. Moving on. But not from a friend or no, or somebody who I think is a friend. That is what sends me into my deepest, darkest rejection spirals, to be honest. And I realize that what I'm saying is a lot to take in, and that my story is a very heavy, intense story. So going back to the text thread, the person said it's mental. Block. So I texted another person who I thought was a friend, and the immediate response was, "It was you. I know it. Everyone treated you so well. You were nothing but loved. Instead, you took and took and took until we had nothing left only to betray us online. We saw your post. What kind of mental sickness do you have? Someone really needs to see the doctor. We gave you your hearts. We trusted you. We only saw your highest good. Shame on you. Shame on me." So, what is it really? That's when I began piecing together the puzzle. I was like, oh my gosh, I went from like, oh my gosh, people are expressing their grievances and frustrations about me too. Oh my gosh, people are probably being told the exact same lie about me. In my opinion, like literally at the beginning of, like literally, when I first joined, I was being told, do not trust such and such, just because of this. Now the same thing is being done to me. And also I got another text that said, really sad that you cannot see your highest good when you can block. So literally, another really big telltale that you're in a high control group is if multiple people tell you the same story or the same story or the same anecdotes about a person or a situation. Let me repeat that. Literally, a way that you can tell, in my opinion, that you're in a high control group is if somebody tells you the same, if not the same, but if multiple people tell you the same story, anecdote about a person or a situation, that is another hint that you're in a control group just because of the mob mentality. People who are able to think to themselves tend to have very slightly varying opinions or very different opinions about why they either like something or they dislike something. I won't go into politics, but for example, when it comes to the president, and I speak to a variety of people outside of the immediate political sphere, I hear so many opinions about that one politician or about that one president. I'm like, wow, people are definitely speaking from their own walks of life, their own backgrounds, and their own upbringing about the president. And I'm like really impressed by the diversity of what people have to say and think. Like, even if I completely agree with some people's like sayings or opinions, I always like to listen to everybody just because of how diverse everybody's opinions, just because of how diverse everybody's stories is. However, when you go inside of the political direct sphere itself, like the sphere, I find even in political groups I do agree with, I find that the stories become homogenous. They become like the same. The reasons become very similar to each other, and there's very little variety the closer you get to the inner circle. That is one comparison I do have. So going back to the social media post itself, the comment flood section is flooded with people who are defending the organization. I remember the video that you posted where you're talking about how the victims social media comment sections tend to be flooded, and it drowns out the voice of the victim, and therefore effectively terrifying any other victim from speaking out. So that comment section was flooded. I eventually get the courage to ask. I asked, "Hey everyone, I realize that the story is about me leaving, but what about bringing up past grievances about me is strengthening your argument?" They had absolutely no response to that. So I asked again. So I asked another question, saying like, "Hey, since I not get a response to why does your past grievances about me? How do you think that past grievances about me strengthens your argument and strengthens your argument about why the group is correct and why I'm wrong?" Still no response. So I finally put in the comment section saying, "Nice try." I finally put in the comment section and I say, when I come to think about it, bringing up past grievances about me is really deflecting away from my story, and is a really effective distraction technique, which I do see through. However, I hope that anybody else who wants to share the story can see through the distraction tactics. Next thing I know, before I could really defend myself in the comments or to tell more of my story, my entire social media account was shut down. They not only did they yank my Facebook offline, they yanked all my Instagram accounts offline, and the group, through massive reporting and, in my opinion, very likely botting, managed to yank all of my accounts offline. So I could no longer defend myself online, and because I had no way of defending myself or reaching out to acquaintances or getting any more help, by this point, in my opinion, the narrative of like Tony's trouble spread like wildfire. Along with stories about how I'm faking my disability for sympathy and to move off people. I then also discovered, in my opinion, that among the niche that it was commonly held, that it's very common here. Tony's trouble, you do not want your name associated with you or your products. This is what happened to us, which is very effective thought domination, like telling somebody else who left a multi-level marketing company, "Hey, you see that person who left? She's trouble. He's trouble. Suddenly, they are so much work. Don't deal with them," which is really effective thought domination. And by this point, the price point the movement has received has somehow, I'm not sure how, maybe you can, maybe somebody can help me put this together, has achieved full respect within that niche, leaving me blacklisted from leaving me very likely, in my opinion, blacklisted from future niche related events. And I've also aligned with some of the really top people and respected people within the niche. That's how my story does end. So if you have any questions or any more discussion, please let me know.
Well, you're a hell of a storyteller. I'm blown away by just what you've described. You know, where you know you're talking about your disability, and it's like you're handling it way better than like people that don't have a disability. Honestly, like just how you're going through it, I don't know how the hell nobody has the coping skills and the way you're able to articulate what you went through without having, you know, the ability to like process your emotions and speak about it. It's like you're doing way better than the rest of us.
Thank you.
Honestly, people in the comments, you're gonna see, they're gonna be like, holy shit, can you teach us your ways? But I don't mean to make light of it, but I need to bring humor into this because I think you're a champion. I can't believe, you know, how you were able to just they underestimated you. These cults always underestimate people, but how they grouped up on you. You know, you make your Facebook post or your social media post, and many of us do this, and then it immediately attracts everybody, and they're just you know, attacking you. And then they took it a step forward and they silenced you. They needed to remove your voice, so then they can just like keep going on, and it's predictable. But they did underestimate you because here you are, and you're speaking out, you know. And I know that you know, you're being anonymous and you're sharing what you can share, but this is going to help a lot of people. I want to just end this with handing it back to you and any last words that you have to share with people.
All right, so as an epilogue, I really thank you for your time and for having me on here. Another thing that I find really wild is just the emphasis on silencing the victims. Not in just my experience, but others' experience. Like literally, the high control groups are actively trying to like, intimidate people legally, try and get them off social media, strike them off social media. And without my voice, without my presence, I have very little means of having any grounds or very much respect within the niche. Mostly because people like to make up stories, and when people make up stories, they're likely to say, yeah, she must have done something so bad to have all of her social media accounts offline. She must have been scamming people, and that's the conclusion that people tend to jump to. Another thing is like having my social is very likely having my social media accounts like knocked offline leads to people concluding that I must be some sort of fraudster, and therefore I should not be believed. Another really terrifying thing I noticed. Another really terrifying thing I noticed before I completely forgot to mention it in the story is I have very, very little trust in meeting new people. Like my sense of trust has been completely eroded. Before having this really bad run-in, I would have shown my face. I'd have been like, "Hey, everybody, this is me. This is my real name. This is who I am." And I would have been like showing my face, and I would have been showing my face. I'd have been all over the internet, like really happy and telling my story. Not happy, but articulate. And another thing is that I do live in fear right now.
I'm so sorry. My cat's outside. I hear her meowing. I just need to let her in. Sorry.
Oh, the kitty. Cat, as a reminder, everybody, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more kitty cats.
Thank you. Please continue. You're awesome.
So another thing is, I completely forgot to mention this before the kitty interrupted. Is that before I got caught up in this group, I used to be an online advocate. I can't say exactly what I was an advocate for, but I used to tell my story about what it was like being me online, and I was like used to be very open, very vibrant. Literally, I was like, 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 literally, I was like a living embodiment of an Easter basket with bright neon eggs. So I think out that time I started meeting new people, showing my face, talking away. But unfortunately, after leaving this group, personally, I have been living in fear. I have been living in fear of the constant retaliation. I have been living in fear as if I dare to show my face again, even if it's for something completely different, that my account will be striked off online. And even as I'm making my and even as I'm making my new friends online, it's taking me forever to trust. It's like my process to trust people has been way slower than it used to be. When I used to make friends with people, I used to here's my story, here's what happened, let's be friends. Now I'm like, hi, hey, what's your favorite color? What kind of food do you like? And I start with the very basic questions, which I used to not do. I used to go to the deep stuff. Now I find myself really shy, and I find it just really hard to trust very many people these days. It's because I fear the retaliation, I fear the backlash, I fear being traumatized, I fear being victimized, and I fear losing everybody all over again.
So many of us feel the same. I can pretty much guarantee that. You know, I was thinking about this last night, oddly enough, about just the trust. And I was like, how can I talk about this feeling? And I feel similarly. I think of it like moss growing on the tundra, where it takes like 200 years for it to like cover like 2 square inches or something. That's what it's like. It's so slow. Like I'll still be, you know, myself, but there's definitely like a distance. Like I keep people further away and I'll be like welcoming. I'm still myself, but it's going to take a lot longer for me to actually really trust people. I'll still be kind, still be, you know, but I have more distance between me and people. I have more of a wall up, and I resonate with what you're saying.
Yeah, I find it really wild just how much like our stories have in common. I know that our stories are completely different, but what really strikes me the most is how most people who are coming from high control groups share very similar stories and very similar occurrences.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure talking, and thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.